What's up, YouTube? Welcome back. 10mm ammo test series continued. We're on number 16 today. Holy crap, number 16. That means there's 15 other ones that you guys should check out. But today, number 16 is going to be double tap 10mm, of course, 190 grain, and this one is the Equalizer. What that means is that there's two different projectiles inside this cartridge. So listed on the box at 1250 feet per second with a 190 grain combined weight of projectile, that is basically a normal loading. So we have a quite simple but nice looking hollow point projectile here, and it should be backed up by another disc. The two firearms we're going to be using today for testing are the Colt Delta Elite 5-inch 1911 and the Springfield XDM Elite OSP 3.8-inch 10mm. We have a red dot on this one, we have iron sights on this one. We're going to put 5 rounds through each firearm into each one of these B8 targets from 20 feet away, and the chronograph will be 15 feet away to capture the velocity. And then we're going to move the chronograph in front of the gel so we capture the velocity of the actual projectiles hitting the gel. We have lined up two 10% clear ballistics gel blocks, 20 inches apiece for a total of 40 inches of ballistics gel. Now that we have all that explained, let's get to testing this stuff. 5 rounds of what should be double tap awesomeness downrange. $11.54. And we better go take a look at this real quick because there are two different entrances. I never really thought about that. So we got that velocity out of the Springfield 3.8-inch. Keep in mind that's the 3.8-inch barrel. And we have my point of aim was right in here. I was of course aiming at the X. And the red dot's not exactly zeroed for this distance anymore. I might have turned it down a hair, we'll have to see. But aiming right here, the main projectile hit here, and then that disc is like a perfect wad cutter hit right there. That is nice having two different holes separated by at least an inch. Very nice. I think that's totally by design. So let's go ahead and put the other 4 in there and see what we get. Now we had an error too that could have something to do with two different projectiles flying through the air. And then as far as recoil, everything rocks this 3.8-inch in a certain way. It's a little bit more recoil than normal for some of these rounds we shoot. However, it's not that bad. This gun handles recoil extremely well. So, in general, not bad. Another air. $11.56, and they're still in the same holes. Well, no, actually, those ones weren't. Don't listen to me on that one. All right, an 11.66. Let's take a look. Wow, that's pretty wild. So we have disc, 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 projectile, projectile, projectile. So we have 1, 2, 3 projectiles, which means this soaked up 2 more projectiles somewhere in here. That's pretty awesome. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 discs accounted for, and 3 projectiles. So that's pretty awesome. I don't think you can get any better than that. We have discs and projectiles making their way right in here into the X ring, still in the 10 ring, and wow, that's pretty awesome. All right, Colt Delta Elite time. Let's see what happens. $12.25. $12.18. $12.23. $11.99. And $12.10. So a little bit under the velocity on the box for this gun in this temperature right now. It's pretty cold. It's like in the 40s right here. But out of this firearm, it is a little bit of a wrist rocker. 10mm out of a 1911, a real 10mm is always going to give you a little bit more recoil than a lot of other guns, less powerful guns, let's say. But this one definitely does put just a little bit of rock right here into the wrist. Still controllable if you're used to this type of a caliber, this type of a recoil. However, you do have some little bit of pinch to the wrist. That's how I can describe this one. All right, aiming right here, of course, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 discs and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in there somewhere projectiles. So a little bit higher point of aim here, which is, it's kind of opposite of what usually happens. Usually I'm in here with the Colt Delta, because we use these same guns for all these tests, and then usually over here when we're doing the XDM, I'm shooting just a little bit high because of the way the red dot's sighted. But they switched roles today. Either way, it's a great group. Actually, you had just a little bit of a better group here out of the Delta, and the chronograph picked it up out of the Delta a little bit more. So maybe they stick together a little bit closer as they, you know, they're closer longer until they get to the target. But both very good groups, both manageable recoil. I really like that. All right, let's let the Delta Elite go first. 15 feet off that block and target. .1242, that's pretty close to 1250. Let's take a look. 1242. And we have two side-by-side wound channels, or entrance wounds right there. So coming in from the side, if you look straight on, it's just one kind of big explosive wound path right there in the beginning. That goes on to probably the 5.5 inch mark. Let's say 5.5 inch. And then it narrows down to a more tiny piercing wound path where we have one projectile, I'm assuming that's the main projectile, opened up at about 12 inches. And the other one starts to streak skyward. It almost went out of the block. That's the disc. The disc is laying right at about 19.5. All right, I straightened the tape out. Right at about 19.5 inches is where you see that disc. Coming from the top, that disc almost left. It's just a very mild poking wound channel right there the whole way down. There's where we see the opened up hollow point projectile. And they've V'd off right there. They came apart at about the 7-inch mark is where they decided to part ways. So one more view from the top. I'm not sure how good it's coming through the camera, but I'm surprised that the disc made it so far. It's very lightweight, but yeah, it sailed. One more from the side going back. That's pretty cool. It made it almost 20 inches. That's pretty surprising. I didn't think it would do that. Let's see what happens with the XDM. Let's see what changes with a 3.8-inch barrel. .1173, let's look. So we have the same thing there on the right. They both stayed pretty close together. So at least at 15 feet, you know these things are staying real close. But by 20 feet, like we saw in the B8s, they're starting to open up a little bit. So coming from the side, we saw that immediate permanent wound cavity, the bigger chunk of it, that's a little bit shorter. If we put the tape up to it, it's about 3.5 inches instead of 4.5 or so. And then that projectile is shredding itself right there at about 8.5 inches. I can see it coming apart pretty good. If I focus in from the top, maybe not. We'll get another look from up there. But they parted ways right there at about 9.5, 10 inches. And I think we had a lot of bounce back actually from the shredded one that you see right there in the center. That must have bounced back all the way from about 14 inches. Then we had the disc diving down, and I'm assuming it bounced right off the bottom of that cardboard. It landed right at about, I'd say 18.5, 19 inches. So that's pretty cool. We'll get those dug out. Let's look from the top real quick. See a little difference right there. See that projectile coming apart right about there. And like I said, it must have had a bounce back. Sorry, the camera doesn't want to focus right now. But must have had a bounce back from there all the way to there with that disc taking its deep dive. Let's rip these things out of here. All right, over here we have the one that came out of the Delta Elite. We have the disc, we have the main projectile. The disc is actually gas checked. And there's the bottom of the main projectile, peeled back pretty nicely. Here's the XDM. This one started to shred itself a little bit. Did a whole lot of bounce back. That might have had something to do with that. I'm not sure. And of course, gas checked on the bottom of those. Those deformed just a little tiny bit. Not real bad. That's about how thick they are. And that's about, maybe you can see that, how thick the projectile is. Kind of ish. So I think it's pretty interesting. We have the one projectile dumping a lot of foot-pounds of energy and doing its hollow point effect. Then we have another projectile behind it doing some more slicing and deep penetrating, getting way in there for sure. It happens on both pistols, just happens in a little bit different way, a little bit different depths. We do have the one projectile, the disc, that veers off, but hey, once it's into tissue, who really cares? We know that there is a little bit of a spread on target between the two. I think that's awesome because it will be two separate wound channels. Once you get out to the 20 and of course beyond, the farther you go, it's going to be like a shotgun. They'll start coming apart. Maybe we're going to have to do some testing with that and see what happens the farther distance you get out. I think that'll be really interesting. But in the meantime, we know that they're accurate at self-defense distances offhand. I forgot to mention that. I do all my accuracy testing offhand because in the real world, you're not going to have a bench rest, you're not going to have a shooting bag or anything like that to put your gun into to help you in a shooting. So, and that's what defensive ammo is all about. We know it's accurate, we see what it does in the gel, we know that the feet per seconds are there, and we know that the foot-pounds of energy are there. So, altogether, let me know what you think about this. I think it's a pretty viable 10mm option. A lot of 10mm is loaded weak. This is definitely not loaded weak. So, if you like 10mm and you don't mind a little bit of recoil, price for this kind of stuff is right in line with everything else. I'll just go ahead and mention that because a lot of people think that some of the more, let's say, boutique ammunition companies or specialized ammunition companies, a lot of people think that the ammunition is really pricey. It's really not for what you're getting. You're getting very nice, pretty much kind of customized ammunition in a way. So I think it's worth it. But with that said, I want to know what you guys think about it. Hope you enjoy this kind of testing. Hope to see you at the next test and any of our other videos. And until we see you next time, stay safe, have fun, and keep shooting.